If you've ever wondered if fate exists, I'm about to tell you a story that might just make you believe. Before I start, I'd love if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. This journey changed my life, and I share stories like this one every week on this channel. It started with a cake. A simple lemon pound cake that I baked too large for just one person. That's how I ended up at Meredith's door that rainy Tuesday evening, not knowing those routine visits would lead to the love of my life, or that I would lose my dearest friend in the process. The thing about love, Meredith told me that night, blue eyes twinkling behind glasses that perpetually slid down her nose, is that it rarely arrives when you're looking for it. She accepted my cake with arthritic hands that still somehow managed to garden better than anyone I knew. I didn't realize then that she was plotting something that would forever change my life. I was 34, fiercely independent, and thoroughly convinced I didn't need anyone. After watching my parents' toxic marriage implode when I was 12, relationships seemed like carefully disguised traps. My apartment was my sanctuary, plants thriving in every corner, books stacked on makeshift shelves, and silence that belonged entirely to me. I worked as a children's librarian, fulfilling my need for meaningful connection without the messiness of actual intimacy. Meredith moved into the apartment across the hall 3 years before that fateful cake delivery. She arrived with boxes of books, a cantankerous orange cat named Chairman Meow, and 71 years of hard-earned wisdom. Within weeks, she'd somehow bypassed all my carefully constructed walls. "Sophie," she would say, pouring tea into mismatched cups from her collection, "loneliness and solitude aren't the same thing. One is a choice, the other is a sentence you've given yourself." I would roll my eyes and change the subject, but Meredith never pushed. That's why I trusted her. That's why, when she mentioned her nephew needed help finding children's books for his daughter, I didn't immediately suspect her motives. "He's lost," she explained, stirring honey into her tea. "His wife left when Lily was barely 2. She's 7 now, bright as a button but struggling with reading. He works from home as an architect to be there for her. He could use your expertise." I agreed because it was Meredith asking. Just a professional consultation, I told myself. Nothing more. The following Saturday, I heard the knock on my door. When I opened it, Meredith stood there with a tall man whose eyes were the exact shade of autumn leaves. A small girl with wild curls clutched his hand, half hiding behind his leg. "Sophie, this is Daniel and Lily." "Daniel and Lily, this is Sophie, the magical librarian I told you about." I remember noticing how Daniel's sweater had a small hole near the collar and how he didn't quite meet my eyes at first. Lily peeked out, assessing me with the frank curiosity only children possess. "Do you really have magical books?" she asked skeptically. I crouched down to her level. "I have books that can take you anywhere in the universe without leaving your room. Does that count?" She considered this seriously before nodding. "I guess that's kind of magical." Meredith beamed behind them, entirely too pleased with herself. "Well, I'll leave you 3 to discuss books. I've got a bridge game with the ladies." Before I could protest, she was gone, leaving me with 2 strangers in my carefully ordered world. What was meant to be a 30-minute conversation about children's literature stretched into hours. Lily gradually emerged from her shell, showing me her drawings, intricate fairy worlds filled with details no ordinary 7-year-old would include. Daniel watched her with such naked love that it made my chest ache. "She gets the artistic talent from her dad," he explained quietly as Lily explored my bookshelf. "The stubbornness too, unfortunately." Something in his self-deprecating smile cracked open a door I'd kept firmly shut. By the time they left, I'd promised to take Lily to a special reading event at the library the following weekend. Daniel's grateful smile stayed with me long after they'd gone. Meredith appeared at my door that evening, innocence personified. "How did it go with Daniel and Lily?" "You're not subtle," I accused, letting her in despite my annoyance. "At 71, I don't have time for subtle." She settled into my armchair like it belonged to her. "He's been alone for 5 years, Sophie. You've been alone your whole adult life. Two people can be drowning right next to each other and still not reach out. I'm not drowning, I insisted. I'm swimming quite contentedly in my own lane. She looked around my apartment, at the single wineglass by the sink, the carefully arranged pillows no one else ever disturbed, the silence. Are you, though? I changed the subject, but the question lingered. The library event came and went. Then there was a trip to the Children's Museum because Lily wanted to show me the butterfly garden. Then Daniel invited me for dinner to thank me, a slightly burned lasagna that made me laugh and him blush. Somewhere between Lily's reading progress and Daniel's shy invitations, I found myself in the middle of something I hadn't planned for. Meredith watched it all with knowing eyes, occasionally dropping wisdom like breadcrumbs leading us forward. Fear and wisdom often wear the same disguise, she told me one evening as I fretted about the growing feelings I couldn't ignore. The trick is figuring out which one you're actually listening to. 3 months after that first meeting, Daniel kissed me in my doorway after walking me home from dinner. His hands trembled slightly against my face, and I realized he was as terrified as I was. Something about his vulnerability made me brave. But relationships aren't fairy tales. The closer Daniel and I grew, the more my old fears surfaced. I'd pull away without explanation. He'd retreat, afraid of pushing too hard. We'd circle each other cautiously, neither knowing how to bridge the gap our respective pasts had created. Meredith watched our halting dance with growing impatience. For heaven's sake, she muttered one afternoon when I was helping her with groceries. You two are going to drive me to an early grave with this nonsense. I'm 40 years too late for an early grave, I teased, putting away her tea. She fixed me with a serious look. Sophie, what are you really afraid of? The question caught me off guard. Losing myself, I admitted finally. My parents lost themselves in each other, and when it fell apart, there was nothing left. I won't do that. Meredith nodded thoughtfully. So instead, you never give anyone enough of yourself that it would matter if they left. Her words stung with truth. That's not fair. Life rarely is, dear. She patted my hand. But loneliness isn't a virtue, and fear isn't wisdom. Daniel isn't asking you to disappear into him, he's asking to walk beside you. The conversation haunted me for days. When Daniel called to cancel our weekend plans because Lily was sick with the flu, I found myself at their apartment with soup and children's books instead of embracing the reprieve. Lily lay pale and small in her bed, her usual energy dimmed by fever. Daniel looked exhausted, having been up all night with her. Without thinking, I sent him to shower and rest while I sat with Lily, reading softly as she drifted in and out of sleep. When Daniel emerged, hair damp and eyes grateful, something shifted between us. He sat beside me on Lily's bed, our shoulders touching as we took turns reading to his half-sleeping daughter. You didn't have to come, he whispered. I wanted to, I realized with surprise that it was true. That night became a turning point. I stayed, making soup and tea, washing dishes, and finally falling asleep on their couch. I woke to find Daniel watching me, a look in his eyes that made my heart race. What? I asked, self-conscious. You're still here, he said simply. Those 3 words contained a universe of meaning. I was still there, not running, not protecting myself, just present in the messiness of real life with them. As Lily recovered, our relationship deepened. Daniel started leaving sketches for me, small moments captured in his precise architectural style. Me reading to Lily. My hands around a coffee mug. The 3 of us walking together, seen from behind. I found myself bringing him coffee at his home office when he worked late, learning how he took it, 1 sugar, splash of cream. Lily and I created a reading nook in her room, complete with fairy lights and pillows. Small intimacies accumulated like treasures. Through it all, Meredith watched, occasionally offering wisdom but mostly just being present. She became our confidant, cheerleader, and sometimes referee. When Daniel and I had our first serious fight, about his ex-wife suddenly wanting to be part of Lily's life again, it was Meredith who helped us navigate the complicated emotions. Love isn't about never having conflicts, she counseled as I cried in her kitchen. It's about choosing to resolve them together instead of alone. 6 months into our relationship, Meredith's health began to decline. It started subtly, forgetting small things, tiring more easily. When she fell in her apartment, Daniel and I took turns staying with her until she finally agreed to see a doctor. The diagnosis was devastating: advanced pancreatic cancer that had already spread. Months, not years, the doctors said gently. Meredith took the news with characteristic grace. "Well, that's inconvenient," she remarked, adjusting her glasses. "I was hoping to see you two get your acts together first." Daniel and I became her caregivers, coordinating with hospice but handling as much as we could ourselves. Lily made her cards and read to her when Meredith's eyes grew too tired. Our lives reorganized around making her comfortable, preserving her dignity, and treasuring the time left. One evening, as Daniel cooked dinner in Meredith's kitchen while Lily and I helped her sort through old photographs, she grabbed my hand with surprising strength. "Promise me something," she said quietly, so only I could hear. "Anything," I replied, fighting tears. "Stop waiting for guarantees. They don't exist." Her blue eyes were clear and certain. "That man loves you, not despite your sharp edges but because of them. And that child needs someone who understands her heart. Don't let fear rob you of the family you could have." I couldn't speak, so I just nodded. Later that night, after we'd settled Meredith into bed and taken Lily home, Daniel and I sat on my couch in exhausted silence. The weight of impending loss hung between us. "I don't know how to do this," I admitted finally. "I don't know how to watch her die." Daniel took my hand, his own eyes red-rimmed. "We do it together. That's all we can do." Something in his steady presence broke through my last defenses. "I'm in love with you," I said suddenly. "I'm terrified and I'm not sure I'm doing it right, but I love you." His smile was like sunrise after the longest night. "Thank God," he whispered, pulling me close. "Because I've been in love with you since you spent 3 hours explaining different dragon books to my daughter." 2 weeks later, Meredith took a sharp turn for the worse. The three of us practically moved into her apartment, taking shifts so she was never alone. On what would be her final night, I sat beside her bed while Daniel put Lily to sleep on the couch. Meredith drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally murmuring things that made sense only to her. As midnight approached, she suddenly became lucid, her eyes finding mine with perfect clarity. "Sophie," she said, her voice barely audible. I leaned closer. "I'm here." She smiled faintly. "You two are hopeless." "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "Still dancing around each other, when life is so short." She squeezed my hand weakly. "Promise me you'll stop wasting time." "I promise," I whispered, tears falling freely now. "Good." Her eyes drifted closed. "Now go get Daniel. I want to see you both." I called him in, and we sat on either side of her bed, holding her frail hands. She looked between us with undimmed love. "My two favorite stubborn people," she murmured. "Take care of each other. And Lily. She'll need you both." We promised through tears. Shortly after, she slipped into unconsciousness, her breathing growing more labored. Daniel and I kept our vigil, sometimes talking softly about memories of her, sometimes sitting in silence, our hands linked across her bed. Meredith died just before dawn, slipping away so quietly we almost missed the moment. The rising sun cast golden light across her peaceful face, Chairman Meow curled at the foot of her bed as if standing guard. The days that followed passed in a blur of funeral arrangements, grief, and the surreal process of dismantling a life. Daniel, Lily, and I moved through it together, our shared loss binding us in ways I couldn't have imagined. One evening, as we sorted through Meredith's belongings, Lily found a small box with my name on it. Inside was a vintage silver locket and a note in Meredith's elegant handwriting. Sophie, I've had 71 years to learn that the only true failure in life is the connection we're too afraid to make. This was my grandmother's, given to her by a man she almost didn't marry out of fear. She wore it for 58 happy years. Now it's yours. Fill it with whatever future you're brave enough to claim. Love always, Meredith. I couldn't speak through my tears. Daniel held me as I sobbed, understanding without words what I'd lost, and found. 3 months after Meredith's death, Daniel, Lily, and I stood in her apartment, now cleared of everything except Chairman Meow, who had become Lily's devoted companion. The property manager had found new tenants, our time of transition was ending. I don't want to say goodbye, Lily said quietly, her hand in mine. At 8 years old, she carried grief with a maturity that broke my heart. We're not saying goodbye to Meredith, I told her, crouching to her level. We're just saying goodbye to this place. Daniel watched us, his eyes soft. Actually, he said carefully, I was thinking, maybe we don't have to say goodbye to the building. I looked at him, confused. My lease is ending next month, he continued. And yours is month to month. What if we found a place together? All three of us? My heart raced as Lily's eyes widened with hope. You mean live together? Like a family? Daniel's gaze never left mine. That's exactly what I mean. In that empty apartment where it all began, standing in the space where Meredith had orchestrated our meeting with such loving interference, I felt her presence as clearly as if she were still there, urging me forward. You too, are hopeless, I could almost hear her say. I took a deep breath and jumped. Yes, I said simply. Let's be a family. Lily's whoop of joy echoed through the empty rooms as Daniel pulled us both into his arms. Over Lily's head, his eyes met mine, filled with a future I was finally ready to claim. 6 months later, we stood in our new home, a small house with a garden Meredith would have approved of. Chairman Meow surveyed his domain from a sunny windowsill. Daniel's architectural drawings and my books commingled on shelves. Lily's art covered the refrigerator. As I unpacked the last box, I found the silver locket Meredith had left me. Inside, I'd placed a tiny sketch Daniel had made of the three of us, along with a pressed flower for Meredith's funeral arrangement. Past and future, together where they belonged. That night, as Daniel and I stood on our porch watching Lily chase fireflies in our new yard, he slipped his arm around my waist. Do you think Meredith knew it would end like this? He asked quietly. I touched the locket at my throat. I think she hoped. And I think she knew we needed a push. Or several, he laughed. The summer twilight wrapped around us, comfortable as an old sweater. From inside, I could hear Chairman Meow knocking something off a shelf, and Lily's delighted laughter as she ran to investigate. You know, I said, leaning into Daniel's embrace, I think we're still hopeless. He kissed my temple softly. Completely hopeless. But at least now we're hopeless together. And in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that Meredith was somewhere smiling, thoroughly pleased with herself for a matchmaking job well done. So if you're watching this and wondering if taking a risk on love is worth it, let me be your Meredith. Life is too short to dance around happiness when it's standing right in front of.